My guests today are writer-director Courtney Dixon and actress, writer, and stunt performer Jenna Kanell. Now, Courtney Dixon dreams up scenarios where real people are heroes, filming sensitive topics in imaginative and memorable ways. Now, she spent several years in branded content as a creative producer and led the creative studio for WebMD. Now, since then, she has collaborated with top brands such as Dove and Chick-Fil-A, just to name a few. But Courtney crafts a visual platform for voices making change using post-production techniques. Now, her unbranded films have been Short of the Week and Vimeo Staff Pick selects. Now, Jenna Kanell is an American actress, writer, and stunt performer, and she gained recognition for her portrayals of Tara Hayes in the cult classic Terrifier and Kim Hansen in The Bye-Bye Man. But her film career has since expanded to a variety of genres, such as the political drama, The Front Runner, and the horror comedy, RENFIELD, and the action comedy, Bad Boys 4. But she joins an all-star cast of an upcoming yet unreleased film, Red One, starring Dwayne Johnson, Chris Evans, and JK Simmons. But their short film, Depression is a Beast, was inspired by a New York Times article about the unexpected correlation between people who suffer from mental health issues and horror films, enabling them to switch the source of their feelings to the screen. Now, this phenomenal documentary short has been selected for the Oscar-qualifying Tribeca Film Festival. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome writer-director Courtney Dixon and actress Jenna Kanell to the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. Now, Courtney, I want to start off with you because how did you first come to learn about Jenna?
Well, it's funny. I came up with this idea and I was like, I need to find this perfect person that can embody this and will really want to be vulnerable and kind of share their story. I started going through Instagram and searching tags and trying to find people that way. And so much so that Instagram actually popped up a message and they were like, are you okay? Because I was searching tags around the topic. So I was like, well, that's great of Instagram to notify me on that. And then I was like, I think I should try a different method. So I reached out to a friend of mine who is a great horror film director, and he connected with me to Jenna, and we had a talk, and I was like, thank you, this is it. And so we shaped it around her life, her story.
So why was it important to tell Jenna's story?
Well, I think Jenna is, a strong character. And I think sometimes, maybe people equate depression to, the opposite of that. And I think it's really great to show someone who is just a strong character, having a great career, and that she also faces it and how she can overcome it. I think that's very relatable.
It is. Now, Jenna, how old were you when you started watching horror films? And was there a particular horror genre that you watched the most?
I was too young to be watching them is when I started. I want to say I was probably about 13. And it's all been downhill, uphill from there.
So were you
And
into...
genre-wise,
Yeah.
usually it was us in a supernatural sort of region.
Well, yeah, I always, when I think of, when someone says horror, the first thing I think of is like slasher films. And I had a dear friend of mine, Herschel Gordon Lewis, who was considered the godfather of gore. And I'm not into gore at all. But I find this New York Times article of the correlation between depression and horror films extremely interesting. Because when I look back at actors, and we can name many of them, I mean, from Robin Williams, there's a lot of comedians that deal with depression and use laughter as an outlet. But for you, Jenna, you're cut from a different cloth because you do come across, and I think it may be probably from some of your movie roles, but even in the film, you're a tough cookie. But then there's this, I guess there's this bit of this fragileness behind that.
Yeah, well, depression is something that I've lived with my entire life, or at least as long as I can remember. And so at a certain point, it just more became about how can I have a relationship with this thing so that it's not in the driver's seat and we can be a part of this together. Because I think a lot of people who live with that sort of thing go through a dynamic, or an arc rather, of trying to get rid of it or trying to ignore it. And none of that works. You have to accept it as a part of yourself and integrate it. And then ultimately it can become your strength.
Exactly. Now, for you, though, was this short film therapeutic for you?
Absolutely, very much so. I was really excited about this concept when Courtney came to me. And it was funny because she originally reached out asking if I knew anyone who would be interested. And I said, yeah, yeah, I do. It was hugely cathartic. I mean, when I work at horror conventions, often people will come up to my table, and very often, almost always, people are in one way or another marginalized, and very often in the form of some form of neurodivergence. And I've wondered for a long time why that was, because I used to think it was just me, that it was just an outlet for me. And through that examination and through Courtney's film, it became more about seeing that it's really very common.
Well, for you, Courtney, let me ask you this. You have a long background working as a content creator with WebMD. How did working with WebMD help you in this area of creating this film about depression, but using Jenna as the focal point?
Well, I think I've had years in speaking with people with various disabilities or conditions. And I think what I gleaned from so many interviews is that it's humbling and inspiring, because a lot of the characters that I've met and done films on are extremely capable and determined and just want to be the heroes of their own story. They're not sitting back and just letting it happen. And I think that that was like that shifted my mind, and like I want to put emphasis on those stories and show that, these people can overcome, and not just this like hopeful, branded content kind of way. Let's do it in something unique and really make people listen.
Depression is a Beast is a very, very powerful film. I've literally lost count on how many people I've interviewed about depression, about loss and grief and suicide. But this film is extremely unique because the way that you bring it forth, and you bring elements out of this film, and using Jenna again as the focal point to bring this out, where people can truly grasp the subject of depression, the context of depression, and for those who don't deal with it, but they may have a family member or a friend that does, I think this enlightens everyone even more because of the way that you visually created this film. So kudos to you on that, because again, this is, out of all the films I've ever seen highlighting depression, I like this one the best because
Thank you.
it just cuts through the nitty gritty here. And Jenna, for you, you made a statement in this film that I had to replay a few times, and I literally had to write it down because I wanted to look at it and really kind of ponder it. You said genetics loads the gun and circumstances pull the trigger. Is your depression genetic? And then how has medical professionals defined your depression?
Well, I first off don't want to take credit for that amazing quote. I believe it was Brene Brown who originally said it, or at least that's where I heard it. But I agree, and it stuck with me too. That's why I was able to repeat it, because the first time I heard it, something sort of clicked, because I think it applies to a lot of things. So yeah, I do think that is the case for me and for a lot of people, but certainly for me, that there was a genetic component on both sides of my family, and that some of it is a chemical imbalance and some of it is generational trauma, and then some of it is just what you go through in your day-to-day life. And being human is tough, no matter who you are, and everyone's problems are legitimate, even if it spans the gamut of what those may look like. So I do
Yeah,
think it was both.
yeah, and everything you just said, I completely agree with, because depression is a multifaceted condition. You just can't, put your finger and go, that's the cause, because there's so much to unpack when it comes to depression. Courtney, I do have a question for you, because how did you write the script for Depression is a Beast. And then when you connected with Jenna, how many changes did you make to the script?
Well, it's funny. I had made I went overboard and made like a 40-page treatment before I even met her. I was like, I know I want to include all these like, beautiful like past, horror films, and how can I pull them in there? But then, when we talked, Jenna would send me, she was super busy and shooting feature films, so she was able to like go back and forth through interviews. Like, she would record them for me, and then I started to be like, okay, well, this film really doesn't apply to that. Like, how can we make it really more centered around her story so that is the focus? So it was a process in getting there. But yeah, going back and forth about 4 interviews and before we kind of put it on paper. And then we knew, obviously, we had an outline to go film with, and then the interview itself we filmed on the day and then took it from there.
And this is for you, Courtney. When you were on set filming this with Jenna, you have an incredible cinematographer. But for you, as Jenna is really being vulnerable, pouring herself out in front of the lens, what was going through your mind emotionally?
Honestly, how relatable it was. Like, I just, like, when she's talking, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I feel that. And so that's how I know, if I'm feeling that, I hope that other people watching the film will feel that, because and then it's hard, as an interviewer, especially, all I do is doc. So a part of you, like, you can't help but get emotional, and so like I'll start tearing up and I'll be like, focus, you got to listen to the story, stop trying to get too into it. But yeah, it was definitely emotional. She was great on camera.
And Jenna,
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, you are, Jenna. You are absolutely fantastic on camera in this film. But I want to ask, because there was a bit of an emotional moment in the film. And you were
Yes.
explaining finding the right therapist, one that can help you remove some of the depressive weight. I thought this was so enlightening. I mean, I even saw the tears in your eyes. I mean, how does it feel when you don't have to carry this load by yourself?
It's a relief. And I mean, I was feeling emotional in that moment. I remember the moment you're talking about. It's the backpack metaphor, where you don't even realize you're carrying around a backpack full of rocks until someone offers to hold just one of them for you. And I got emotional because when you do find the right therapist and it feels like you're truly being listened to and heard and seen and given space for and validated and all of this, then it's this immense relief that you maybe didn't even know you needed. And one of the reasons I was able to be vulnerable, even to go back to your last question, was because Courtney created a very safe environment and because she was vulnerable with me. I mean, I think if you had been super clinical and sterile, I don't know that I would have been as comfortable sharing what I did. And even the environment, like, everyone on set was, I mean, Christian Zuniga, the cinematographer you talked about, I've worked with him a couple times. He's always amazing. And like, everyone involved was really sweet and kind and open. And that when we're open with each other, it's much easier not to build walls and to just open up. And so it was easier to get emotional, because in a way, that's what we were doing there. Was I felt like sharing my story made it, if it makes someone else's story even just a little bit lighter, then it's totally worth it. To throw another quote at you, since you liked the last one of my favorites is Mr. Rogers used to say, if it's unmentionable, it's unmanageable. And I think that's something that documentaries have a lot of power to wield.
They do. And you bring up a word that I'm extremely happy that, Courtney, you did not use in this film. You did not make this film visually sterile. It would have been flat, boring, and would have never had the power to reach people on a mental and an emotional level. I love this array of cinematography, because you used multiple forms to tell Jenna's story, but you also used multiple forms to expand on depression. When I looked at this film, I'm like, okay, who's the character? We know Jen is the focal point, but depression's the villain. But and of course, Jenna, you just said, Christian Zuniga was an impeccable cinematographer here. You have live action, you have animation, you have a variety of cameras that I assume were either a variety of cameras or the effects in post to show the multifaceted complexities of depression. Brilliant filmmaking from beginning to end. The film flowed seamlessly from frame to frame, even with all of the changes from whatever the camera that was used, from the animation, it flowed. There was nothing that was out of place. For me, being an audience and watching this, I completely understood the visuals. I understood all of the dialogue. It's very emotional. For you, when you saw the finished product, how did you feel about the overall outcome of this film?
Me?
Yes.
Or Jen?
Or both, but yeah, Courtney first.
I just, I love filmmaking because it is a collaborative process. I truly believe that. I think from pre-production to post-production and editing is definitely I love the most, because that's where the magic happens. So when I see it at the end, well, in my head, honestly, as a filmmaker, the first two or three cuts, I'm like dying. I'm like, what did I make? How do I fix this? But in the end, once all the pieces come into place, it's just like you sit back and you're like, wow, I got to work with the most amazing artists, and to see it come to life in a way that is even better than what you had planned for is always, it just makes you keep coming back for more.
It does, because with the elements of special effects and the animation, how long did it take you to complete the film from start to finish?
We were kind of rushed just, due to schedules, but it was, about 3 months, maybe almost 4 months for everything. But there were certain things from the pre-interviews, Jenna talked about masks, she talked about water, all the visuals that I knew that I wanted. How could I put them in place? So I built the VFX team from the start, and we were already running on those before we even shot. So we knew what we wanted to get. We knew what we needed to get, props and how we needed to film it. So yeah, those elements were there. And then we knew we wanted to do animation as well. So we had to start very early, early on in the process.
Well, I love the style of the animation because it's very comic book superhero like, with an edge, which I think worked completely perfectly for this. And I love the fact that you used a lack of color in the animation. You didn't just go full blown, multi 40 color kind of thing. You went from if I think back right now, I probably count 3 colors: black, a form of white, and then there is what, a reddish type tone, and it works because it's not flat. It just, again, it's brilliant filmmaking. And I was surprised that you said 3 months, because I've talked to people who've done animation or animated short films, and I'm hearing, oh, it took me 10 months. It took me 2 years. And then, so you started that process prior to filming?
Yes. Thankfully, like I said, Jenna gave us such great recorded interviews that I could go through and be like, okay, let me piece this, give them enough to work with that we knew we were going to definitely use this story. So, we were able to start fast.
Well, Jenna, I know the sections of the film in which you were displaying different masks. Does the film correctly give depression a face?
Yes and no. I think it absolutely gives it a form. And to your point, I think the masks sort of illustrate that it doesn't necessarily always have one face. It's kind of an ever-changing visage, and that's one of the reasons it's so hard to get to know and to see, because it's different on a day-to-day basis depending on your environment and what you're dealing with, and, to use one of the metaphors in the film, how high the water levels are that day. But I absolutely think it gives it a form in a way that I hope relates to a lot of other people's stories when they see it as well.
Oh, it will. It will. I know a lot of people who deal with depression, from mild forms to literally dark
Right.
dark moments. And this film, I think, is going to be therapeutic for so many people who see it, but also bring understanding, like I said before, bring understanding to those who don't deal with depression, but now can really truly grasp what depression is and to be more empathetic to people who deal with that condition. For you, is acting a release from depression, or does it provide some sort of healing of the condition in the moment?
It's very much a catharsis. Again, kind of like filmmaking, like we were talking about a little bit earlier. It very much is. It gives, I mean, any sort of artistic expression is an outlet. And I mean, I'm sure even what you do in a way perhaps is an outlet for you, where you're connecting with people and it brings you into the present moment. You can't be thinking about yesterday or what am I doing later, because if you're not present, you can't do the good work, and you can't be creative, and you can't show up for the people around you in this sort of team sport way that you have to for something like this. So it's maybe isn't, a cure. I don't know that there is that, but it's certainly very, very, very cathartic and healing.
It is. It is. People ask me, what do you do in your spare time? And I'm like, editing.
Right. What spare time?
Yeah, 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 exactly. And all three of us kind of know what, like, spare time, what is that? And, because sometimes, for me not to be stressed out, or maybe, having a day where you maybe get a case of the blues, just set me in front of a graphics program and just let me dive into that world, and I'm cool.
Yeah, it's an outlet.
It is, and I think a lot of people need to realize that. And you brought up so much into this film, and Courtney, I want to thank you for capturing so much of what Jenna was saying. Where there were people with depression, severe depression, have days where they want to stay in bed all day, and for you, let's just use this as an example. Let's say you have one of those days. Is there something that you do to force yourself up and to just face life head on?
There are a number of things that I do. It's almost sort of it has to be a perfect storm, or a recipe rather, that I've worked on for years with my therapist, who it did take me a while to find, and I'm grateful to have finally found someone. But meditation is helpful on an ongoing basis so that you can be ready for those days. Same with journaling. Same with yoga and exercise and eating well. But when those days actually come and you maybe don't have those coping mechanisms in within reach, what I'll often do is I'll negotiate with it, like I'm a hostage. I'll negotiate with my depression. I'll basically say, okay, fine, you can stay in bed today, but then tomorrow we're getting up, and that's my final offer, sort of thing. Because sometimes it's much harder to fight it than to sort of say, I'll allow myself the space to be in this place, and I'll honor this sort of space that I'm in right now, as long as I get up later. And that's the deal I'm making.
Okay, let me throw this scenario out there to you. Let's say your agent calls you up and says, hey, there's a part coming up. Can you do a self-tape? But you're having one of those days that isn't all grand. How do you muster up the ability to turn that off and go into full acting mode?
That's a good question. I think the important thing is that I don't necessarily turn it off completely. I try to channel it into what I'm doing. I mean, again, I'll say, okay, if this is the one thing in terms of priorities, I make a lot of lists. I find lists very helpful. In terms of priorities, if this is the one thing on the list that's urgent and has to get done today, then again, hostage negotiation. I'll do that today. Everything else you can put off till tomorrow. If you just get this one thing done, you can take the rest of the day off. And then when I'm doing that one thing, it's, I'm showing up with people that I trust and that I can be myself around, and that I don't have to be on for, if I'm taping with them, other than to do the work. And then similarly to channel whatever it is, like to use whatever I'm bringing into the room. And Courtney, I'm sure can speak to this more as a filmmaker. You don't ever want to force your subjects into what you want them to do. You create a space in which they bring in whatever it is they're bringing with them that day, and use that to inform the performance, because otherwise it'll be false. And the whole point is to tell the truth. That's what this is all about.
And this film is, again, probably the truest visual to explain depression. And how long was this film? Was this 12 minutes?
Yeah, right at about 11:45, right at 12. Yeah.
I've got a good memory.
Yeah. You'll get
I've seen so many short films in the last 2 weeks. I'm trying to keep tabs on the time. But ladies and gentlemen, you talk about a film that in 12 minutes will explain everything you almost need to know about depression and depression as a beast. This is not sterile. This is not flowery. This is not bright white, sterile and clean. This, and I don't even, and you know, this is what is so, I'm not going to say strange. What I love about this film, even though the textures, the cinematography appears dark, I didn't feel darkness as I watched it, which I think is the plus for your film. Because when I see films that are dark, the cinematography is dark, the subject matter, and of course the subject matter here, we could call it dark. But with what you brought forth on film, and Jenna, with what you brought into this film, there is light throughout this film. And I think that's what makes this film so grand.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of hope. That's one of the things I love about it as well. I mean, when you watch horror movies, it's so rewarding when the person gets out of the house at the end or when they come out victorious and, we're all the heroes of our own story.
That's it. But the blonde girl always gets it first.
I know.
well, but more importantly, Courtney, I saw the number at the end of the film, 988. What does that lead to? Or where does that lead to?
Someone to talk you through for emotional support, whether that's you're just having a bad day, whether, the far end of that, suicidal thoughts. It's good to know that there's a number you can call for that kind of help, or even help of how to speak to someone else that is going through it. So yeah, it's a really important number to know.
And Jenna, when you're on set, we're not mentioning any names, but like, let's say you're on a film set, and because of your experience with depression, is it easy for you to spot someone that shows the signs of depression?
Sometimes. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, like we've talked about, it doesn't show up at all, and it's very, very hard to see, and you'd be very surprised of the people who are carrying it around. But sometimes, yeah, because we are in a space where we're all being artistic and vulnerable with one another, sometimes I do see it, and I try to just be present with them and show that I am a safe space and a non-judgmental space.
I love that. I love that. And now to both of you, how does it feel to be appearing at the Tribeca Film Festival?
Oh my gosh, it's such an amazing opportunity and honor. Like, this is a great film festival, and just to be a part of all these amazing filmmakers, it's just such a great experience.
And Jenna, how does it feel for you to be appearing at Tribeca?
Unbelievable. I'm so excited. I'm going to do my best not to cry during the panel, but I'm not making any promises at all. Happy cry, to be clear.
Oh, absolutely.
All of the emotions are high.
Well, for both of you again, what do you want the audience to take away from your film?
I would say, as you already mentioned, depression is so vast, but it can also be so nuanced. And so I feel like treatment options should be as well. And, finding what works for you, whether that's therapy, journaling, or horror, it's just finding the right tools to put in your toolbox. So.
Yeah, who'd ever thought that horror films would be therapeutic for some, and but there's many genres of horror for one. But ladies and gentlemen, this short film, Depression is a Beast, really expands the conversation about the complexities of depression. Now, the causes of depression are numerous, and Jenna alluded to this, from genetics to chemical imbalances, life experiences, and even things that, well, we just can't define. But this film is one that opens up and expands the conversation about mental health. Now, mental health issues in our society are at an all-time high, and unfortunately, they seem to continue to grow. But some of you are going through your own horror movie, so to speak, and are struggling to find a therapy or an outlet to bring some sort of peace and normalcy to your life. Now, if you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available by calling or texting the number 988. The 988 Lifeline provides 24/7 free and confidential support for people in distress, prevention and crisis resources for you and your loved ones, and best practices for professionals in the United States. Well, Courtney and Jenna, thank you so much for sharing your film with us, and I pray that it will deeply resonate with the audience all over the world, even in our communities, and I know now at the Tribeca Film Festival.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. And again, brilliant filmmaking, covering a subject that can be difficult. Courtney, I already see that this is an award-winning film. And Jenna, hey, you're already an award-winning actress. So much success to both of you, not only at Tribeca, but with all of the new projects that you are working on and the new films that will be coming out. Again, much, much success. And I can't wait to see everything that you either star in or direct and produce.
Thank you so much. So wonderful to meet you.
Oh, it's great to have both of you here. And again, ladies and gentlemen, when you have the opportunity, and if you're going to be at Tribeca Film Festival, you have to check out Depression is a Beast. And when this film becomes available to the public to see, you've got to see this film and bring loved ones with you or those that may be dealing with depression, because there is a therapeutic point to this film. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for watching, but you can catch all of the replays of our interviews with top film directors, producers and screenwriters, actors, and more on Bond on Cinema. We are available on YouTube and a dozen audio platforms such as iTunes and Spotify, so please subscribe. But again, I want to thank you for watching and listening, and as for me, I'll either see you at the movies or from the red carpet.